Hey everybody, welcome to Distance by Design. This is a show where we talk about creativity, innovation, and working together in the midst of an unprecedented time of a global pandemic. My name is Aaron Bradley. I'm a professor at the University of Cincinnati, teach classes on design thinking, innovation, and digital storytelling. And a lot of that storytelling over the past few months has come to talking to people about how they're adapting to the crazy world that we live in. If you're watching this for the first time, it's the fall of 2020, and we're still very much in the middle of a global pandemic that's pushed us all to work remotely and find new ways to collaborate and work together. So we spent a lot of time this summer talking about how that had changed everyone's business and work, and kind of took a reset and pause and decided to come back this fall and recognize that this might be the way we're all working together for a while. So rather than dwelling on that or focusing on that, we're just going to talk about the interesting stories of creative leaders and things that they're doing, despite the fact that we're distant and despite the fact that we're all adapting. There's still great stories to be told, and that's what we're going to do today. So my guests today are Joe and Leslie Stitzlein, and they are coming to us from Cincinnati, but you're normally not in Cincinnati, right? You want to give us a little background about yourselves, the studio, and your story?
Sure, thank you. Well, Joe and I have been working together for about 5 years as Stitzlein Studio. So as you mentioned, we're in the Bay Area, and we work on branding, and we also do a lot of typeface work as well, custom typeface design. So we've been collaborating after having separate careers. We happen to be married, and we decided to start our own agency when we had gathered a lot of experience, a combination of in-house design. So Joe worked at Landor here in Cincinnati and at Nike, and then most recently, before our agency, at Google. And I had worked at a lot of small independent agencies in San Francisco, and also worked at Pentagram Design. So we got to a point in our careers where we wanted to get closer to the work. Joe especially had worked with large teams and had gotten further and further from the work day to day himself. Mm-hmm. And we just saw the opportunity that we could really help a lot of different brands in San Francisco and across the country. Mm-hmm. And we thought it was the right time.
So those are some powerhouse companies that we're talking about here. I think somebody mentions Pentagram, Nike, Google, mm-hmm. things like that. There's obviously already, there's a bit of a credibility that comes with that. And there's also a lot of assumptions that come with that. Are there any projects that you're particularly proud of from either pre-working together as a couple or in the last 5 years that really typify the work that you think best speaks for what you all do?
There's so many, and I think the cool thing about I just had my 25th anniversary of graduating. I graduated in '95, and looking back, you see all these milestones in your career. I remember being in school at DAAP in the '90s and thinking how cool it was just to design a business card on a co-op, right? And then now looking back, there's so many milestones when you have a career over a couple of decades, and it's cool to see how they all build off of that experience at DAAP and all the things you learn at DAAP and all those lessons you learned at the different co-ops. So, I think for me, I was always really into design at scale. And I think now designers take it for granted because you design for the web. And so you're inherently designing for scale now. But back when design was more analog, it was really cool to design a package for Crest toothpaste to see it on shelf. And obviously that was at scale, right, at Target or at Kroger. I think about some of the work that I did at Nike, launching Nike Flyknit or launching the Nike Free shoe, which was cool because it was the best-selling shoe in sport, but it was also the best-selling shoe in the world, period. And being a part of that team was really great. Being at Google and of course designing for billions of consumers and designing websites for Google Maps, reaching so many consumers all around the world with software properties that people love was really great. But to Leslie's point, it was really great to also kind of design more small clients again. And we've done work for local restaurants, but we've also done work for larger companies as well. So we've kind of worked at all scales, and they're all rewarding in different ways.
Yeah, and I love how you mentioned this idea of things building on each other, right? Like,
Yeah,
especially because as a professor teaching students, like I'm always kind of
right.
trying to like set them up on a journey. And one of the phrases I've come up with recently is that I'm actually less worried about what you learn as
Hmm.
how you learn,
Hmm.
because I want you to be learning during this. You have this incubator time while you're a student, right? Where hopefully we're setting you up to understand how to learn and evolve.
Yeah,
Because as we've just experienced over the last few months, like the ambiguity of the world is only getting
yes,
greater. So we got to help set you up with how to think so that your career can evolve and your design aesthetic can evolve.
right.
What are some of the things that maybe those marker points that if you look back over the 25
Hmm.
years, like
Hmm.
where did you start to level up, or what happened to kind of turn the corner?
Oh, I think that one thing that is really exciting for me in our business is that we're always learning.
Hmm.
And so every client that we work with is a new problem to solve. And even within that particular client's needs, there's always new areas. So, for example, sometimes we'll get pulled into a brand project, and then over time, that brand will evolve into an environmental project. And, so there's aspects Joe mentioned earlier about when we were in school, the field of graphic design was somewhat narrow, and now it's so broad, and our opportunities are so broad that
Hmm.
we're always learning both about our clients, but then about how to work in different areas. So, for example, we're also getting involved in experience design. That's really
Hmm.
interesting. Um, so it's never the same thing. And
Right.
for us, it always goes back to just solving client problems.
Hmm. And being graphic designers, like Leslie said, we get involved in so many industry verticals, and they're, and it's really exciting to learn about what is data analytics and coming into that and studying the business behind that, and what is the competitive set about, what are their business challenges, what are their unique user challenges of that, or the next day, talking to a restaurant and understanding what their challenges are. Or talking with an automotive startup and out of Germany, right? I think that's what's exciting about being a graphic designer is, you can dive into so many industry verticals because of course they have things in common brand challenges, but then they have distinctive and unique differentiators as well that keeps it interesting all the time. And that makes the output different from a design perspective. So it might be more digital for one client, or it might be more about an environment for another, or more about an interface for another one. So it keeps the job really exciting. And you can look at that as a daunting thing of like, oh, wow, it's stressful to think about all these different mediums. But we look at it as really exciting because it keeps it fresh.
I see a lot of younger creatives, whether they're students or early in their career, that because they want to really master their craft and be proud of that, they kind of almost unintentionally or intentionally box
Mhm.
themselves into saying like, "Oh no, I'm this kind of designer. Like you
Mm.
should
Right.
ask somebody else to do that part of a project." And
Mm.
I just feel like that actually is so counterintuitive to
Right.
what you're
Mm.
describing for the longevity of a career.
Right. Yes, I think
Definitely.
so. I think you have to be, courageous and curious as a designer, and that makes it interesting. I think, we work alongside creative technologists and engineers to think about how do we use a new API, or how do we use, a new platform for digital craft to make our work even more interesting and more exciting. So we love working with engineers and computer scientists to make our work better and more exciting, not just as a form of output, but as something that's inherently at the beginning of a project. So, for example, we're about to complete a global font for a social media platform, and it's a font for 6 to 7 billion people, which means it has to be in many, many languages and many, many alphabets from of course, from our alphabet, Latin to Greek to Hebrew, Thai, traditional and simplified Chinese, Japanese. And I think what's exciting about that is, we get to work with experts all around the world that understand those languages. And some of those I designed myself. Some of those I consulted with experts on. But that's what's really fun about what we do is one day I'll be on a call with an Israeli type designer starting to understand Hebrew and how does the structure of the Hebrew language built in a typeface. And then the next day I'll be talking with someone out of Athens on the Greek alphabet. And that just really makes, our jobs really exciting to constantly learn, constantly push things. It's very research based, but we also want to make sure we're on the forward edge of things as well and keeping it exciting.
Well, we're talking about all these different geographic locations, and we kind of started off by saying Cincinnati natives who are no longer,
Right.
but came, back for this week or whatever. What was that shift? When did you make the move to say, I'm leaving Cincinnati, I'm going to the West Coast? And now that you can really compare the two, is there a difference? I mean, I think there's assumptions around that. Well, it's the West Coast or it's New York or whatever it may be. Insert other place here, but can you speak to that some? How is the design scene or the way that work is approached different?
And I would say, my experience, because I was a design director at Landor, Cincinnati for almost 3 years in the early 2000s. Obviously there's a strong CPG focus or consumer packaged goods focus because of Procter and Gamble and Kroger, and there's obviously a very broad industry footprint in Cincinnati as a consumer packaged goods hub in the entire country. And so that, of course, has a strong impact on the creative community here. But I've really enjoyed the creative renaissance I've seen in the last, I would say, 5 years in Over the Rhine, becoming the home of very, very good boutique agencies, that are doing really good work across many industries, not just packaging, but in technology, in music, so, and in beer. The beer design industry here is amazing. The brewery industry is amazing. And I've seen some very good work to support that vertical. And that's really exciting to see as a native son of Cincinnati, to see great work happening here. And that's just really, really encouraging. But of course, in the Bay Area, we've got different industry verticals to support. But it's really great to see, that renaissance happening in Cincinnati from a design perspective.
Well, a lot of times people talk about it, gets thrown around this like, Midwestern work ethic. Like it's a great term to just kind of slap on
Definitely.
something. As you reflect back on, being from here, leaving and everything, is that something that, would you give credit to that? Is that true? Do people notice that and talk about that outside of the Midwest?
They do. Yeah. I mean, I heard that at Google a lot was, at Nike, I hired a lot of people, but they tended to be more Pacific Northwest based. At Google, it was more global. And so you notice that, unique work ethic. And, I was often accused by HR of having a bias towards Midwestern recruits for that reason. I knew what I was going to get. So I definitely think there's sort of an integrity. I think there's just a sincerity. I think there is a care for work that is definitely true. And it's hard to appreciate when you're here, and you don't appreciate it till you go somewhere else. But I think that's something that Leslie and I bring to our work. And she talked about that at the beginning. We really value the relationships with our clients, and I think they value how deep our thought process is about their business and about them as people. And that kind of empathy brings better work out of the process from a design perspective. And I think that's because of where we grew up. We really care about the work, and we really care about the clients that we have and the relationships that we've established with them. We tend to have long relationships with our clients, and we really value those. We tend to, of course, some of them could be 3 months or 4 months, but we've also had long multi-year relationships with some of our clients that we really value. And I think that goes back to coming from here and approaching everything with as much sincerity and authenticity as possible.
Obviously, at this point, like, you two are the brand, right? You are the company, you're the brand. And so there's a lot of that kind of ownership of the relationship that you get to have, but that probably also comes with some challenges too, of like, you don't have an in-house account, team or client service team or anything, right? I mean, how how do you all just take that on yourselves, or have you found creative ways to outsource that? Or
yes and no. I mean, luckily I like are learning about how to run a business. There's something really satisfying about when we launched our business, we, like Leslie said, I left the corporate world, but I'd been for 10 years at Nike and then Google. And after climbing the ladder, I really missed the directness of working as a designer for a client or with a client. And so I find it really rewarding to put an invoice together or learn about QuickBooks or, work on our taxes, believe it or not. I just find that really rewarding because everything we put into our business helps the business succeed. And I think that's true of any entrepreneur, whether you're selling, whether you own a bakery or you own a design firm. I think that's what's satisfying about running a business is everything you put into it, you get out of it. And I'm an avid runner, and I really believe in you become a great runner by just putting more steps into running. And it's the same for a business. The more you put into it, the more it succeeds. And I find that very satisfying and also refreshingly clear in life, because there's so many things in life that are unclear, especially when you're in a big company, about why did that choice get made or why is this happening? Who knows, right? It was a decision on high. It's just life is simpler for us because we get out what we put into our business. And I think that's one of the more rewarding aspects of being an entrepreneur. I'm not sure if I directly answered your question, Aaron, but that's kind of what I like about running a business.
Yeah. No,
Right?
I think it's interesting because you both have the perspective too of having done both. It's interesting to see, especially right now, generationally, it's very popular for young creatives to kind of romanticize and make an idol out of I'm going to be my own creative. I'm going to be my own. I'm going to have it's just going to be me and maybe one or two other people. And obviously that can be a really rewarding, rich place to come from. But sometimes, depending on where they're at in their career, I'll look from the outside and say, you would probably be good at that in 10 years or 15 years, right? Like, don't shortcut what you can take from this time of being around other people. And,
I think that's an extremely important point. We've talked about that a lot, that those early years when you're on a team and you're surrounded by a whole group and you can collaborate, you can learn from people above you, are critical. And I would not have wanted to be on my own as a junior designer. It would be not only stifling to growth, but it would also be kind of boring. Those are the years when you really want that sense of teamwork, that sense of being part of an agency. And so now, today, our sense of teamwork comes from the more remote team that we bring in. And when we choose to work with other creatives, in addition to clients, it always is about chemistry, right? So we reach out to other creatives because we like working with them. We not only do we appreciate their talent in a certain area, but it's always about the energy of the team, right?
Yeah, I think that's something hard to appreciate when you're really a young designer, is how all of those almost invisible processes come into the work and show through the work. I think team chemistry, to your point, Leslie, that shows up as joy in the work and maybe an extra sense of passion and craft. I think the chemistry with clients shows up in the work that way. And I didn't really realize that when I was a young designer at DAAP. Of course, you don't think about that. You're so into the formality of the work and craft. But only later on you start to understand, looking back, that a project turned out well because of all those invisible factors as well as the craft. And whether it's the research you did or the relationships, I think those things are hard to understand in the school experience because that's not part of the school experience, but that's definitely part of the real world. And looking back, what you've learned is that influence and how it results in the work, which is kind of magical, right? You're not really taught that in design school necessarily.
No, that's a great point. It's hard to put words to it even. It actually, like, this conversation challenges me to try and figure out how to better articulate that, because I do want young creatives to understand that. So I'm leading 2 studios right now that are kind of I created in response to COVID and people being distanced, and kind of built this new model that kind of allows studio to function remotely and substitute for a co-op experience. So we have different clients that we're doing this for, and they're all transdisciplinary teams. And this current semester session that we're doing, we do these 5-week sprints. There's 2 going on right now. and the talent level of the students on both is on par. They're all at the same level
Mm-hmm.
pretty much. There's a couple that are good at unique things, but really it's not about the talent difference. But what I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed is over the course of 5 weeks, one team has really gelled. And
Mm.
I'm in on and can see not only when we're synchronously together, but I'm on all of their teams conversations and can just see the way they encourage one another and sort of
Mhm.
plus one everybody's
Yeah.
ideas. And they're just excelling and having fun in the work too. And it shows with the output versus the other group
Right.
that's very much just kind of trying to get along well enough to like figure out who should do what parts of the job.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. Right. So it sounds like sometimes work becomes more like work, where you think of it in that classic sense, like task oriented and checklists, and that's hard for design because design is so much about expression too, and I think that's where the chemistry comes in. And you kind of talking about this idea of cooperating and co-opetition, which is a bit of a cliche, but that's kind of my term for that. And I've been in environments that are heavily competitive, and I've been in environments where it's more about cooperating. And I, as a person, just do better in the more cooperative environments where I feel like you've got the safety to express ideas and experiment. I've always done better in those than I have in environments that are more about stack ranking and competing with each other. And some people actually do well in those environments, but that's just not me. So I think over the years, as a young designer, you just need experience to get to know who you are and what makes you tick. And then you can start choosing the right place to live, the right type of graphic design or other design discipline to do that makes you excited, the right team environment, team culture. But that just takes experience to understand that, so you can thrive and flourish. And some of that came from UC and doing co-ops, of getting exposed to working in New York for a certain type of studio or San Francisco for a company. You get a sense of what makes you tick and what gets you excited. And that was what was great about our experiences. I'd worked at boutiques in New York and they were okay, but I really liked being at Landor in San Francisco and Chronicle Books in San Francisco. And I liked those big organizations because Leslie made the point about being part of a team. At that point in my career, I was absorbing everything, and I really wanted to have mentors and people I could have a beer with after work and talk about design. And that was right for me then. But now I'm perfectly happy being a hermit, working on typefaces all day, and emerging every few hours to have a conversation. But back then, I really needed that energy to come in.
So, when you talk about that creative process and everything, I think that's always something interesting for somebody who's worked in multiple environments, and especially if you've used that to ladder up to going out on your own. Do you notice now, as a studio yourselves, do you have a process that you tend to generally follow?
Mm.
Obviously, we always adapt our process to the client need,
Yeah.
but do you have sort of your signature process? And if you do, are there things that you feel like you can step back and look and like, I learned that at Google, I learned that at Pentagram, I learned that at Nike? Do you
Mm-hmm.
see the experiences from the past now showing up in what is signaturely yours?
Oh, definitely. I think that's definitely true. We have a process that, well, whether it's a brand project or another project, the general process is always the same. We always start out with discovery, and this is one of our favorite parts, really, where we're of course learning about the client and the industry. We love to do interviews with both people within our client, but also their customers.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of this is always to gain insights, and we call these aha moments.
Mm-hmm.
We always make sure to gather these insights and then feed them back to the client. So I think along the way, we're always trying to show them how interested we are in their process and bring up questions. And often they're easy questions, but sometimes they're difficult ones. And so we're always trying to show them that we're thinking and get them to think as well. And so we have discovery, then we go into exploration, of course. In this way, we're always looking at different areas. Joe likes to throw in what he calls dangerous ideas, and this is always interesting because now that we've been working together for a while, I've gotten used to this. But at first, I would say, no, they're never going to do that. And he was like, yeah, of course they're not. But that shows that we're really thinking. And it may then, they may say, oh, I see you thought of that. And it may push them back to this other idea that really is right for them. And so we really try to explore the edges of ideas. So then, of course, we're working together with a client to narrow those ideas down, and then we get into more refinement once we've got things narrowed down. Now, during refinement, certainly the design is not finished at all. There's always things that come up. There's additional, maybe ideas or thoughts. I think one thing that we always try to do with every project is we want the project to make you feel something. And so we never want to just turn on some kind of automated process that is like, okay, now we're done and we carry out these 3 areas or something. We're always trying to keep that connection with our customer's customer. So that's and that's what keeps us excited about the work too.
Yeah, I would add that I think at UC, at least when we were in school, we had such a great background in systems, and that really taught us, how to build a brand long term, right, with longevity and a sense of timelessness, which is really powerful. And very respectful of the client business. And I purposefully sought out experiences that could augment and challenge that. So, for example, at Nike, they really didn't understand systems as much. They were really about emotion from design. You think about the campaigns or beautiful images. And so I really sought that out as a way to challenge everything I'd learned by working there. And, my boss used to say, if it could go on a T-shirt, that's when it's working. Right? If a teenager will wear what you do on a T-shirt, that's a successful design. And that's a different criteria than designing a classic Swiss system from DAAP. And so putting those things together is really interesting, right? Emotion plus system. And then at Google, it was all about designing at scale, digital first, right? So that's another augmentation that we've learned from and try to deliver to our clients now is systems, emotion, and then digital scale. Combining those 3 together, I think, help set us apart from graphic design agencies, but also from other, but then, those give us a nice kind of differentiator. But, and I think we also function, to Leslie's point, as business partners to our clients. So going beyond executional excellence and being, leveraging our knowledge of having worked with Procter & Gamble. How does that apply to a digital problem? How does working at Nike or Pentagram apply to, a startup in Silicon Valley? They love having those experiences to draw on from us. And that gets into conversations that are slightly different than design conversations. They really become business strategy conversations, which is really fun for us, but it also allows us to command a higher level of a relationship than just a tactical executional relationship, which is very rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just a service provider or vendor that's like, okay, I go to you, it's, but think about building a house. Somebody who's drywall, doing drywall, like, hey, I pretty much just expect, I know what drywall should look like, right? Drywall, and as long as it looks clean, then we're good. That's different than the person that you trust to design the house, right? Or and think about how you as a person will live there and experience it, right?
Yeah, I think we're in the position where we can ask clients why they're doing something, or we can help them think more clearly, or we can shift direction. I think that, I think being a CEO of a startup and trying to get funding and trying to, keep a team employed, that's a very hard job. And I think that whatever we can do to help bring them a user perspective on something, or bring in a design thinking perspective that helps them with their business goals by shifting things a little bit, when they need it, because they've got a lot of irons in the fire, and so I think we bring a lot of experience to the table, and I think that we are seen as true business partners. Which, over the long term, I would advise younger designers to think about. The traditional path, of course, is designer, senior designer, getting into creative director, but I think it's all about. Another way to think about it is, what are deeper levels of value to bring to clients as well, that come with that pathway. and making yourself more valuable, bringing your perspective, bringing your experience, but also thinking about, how you can run a premium business as well, right? We're all charging rates, and Leslie and I don't try to compete with businesses that are just working at a service provider level. We try to position ourselves at a more strategic level, and that's important from our business perspective as well. So we tend to function as brand labs in a way. So for example, we've been working with data analytics from Cloudera for several years, and they come to us with bigger problems to solve, like what's an ad campaign that can reposition one of their products, or how do they recraft their sales experience? So of course, those involve design artifacts, but they come to us with the problem first and then work with us on what the design artifacts can be from that. And I think that's really what we've tried to get to for 20 years now. And so we're really lucky when we get to that level with the client. And I think that's what comes with experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great example of that. And that's a good inspirational word for, some of the younger creatives that hopefully will check this episode out. So,
Yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that either of you would like to bring up or kind of delve into?
I guess one thing that I would say, sort of an encouraging thing, is about starting a business. And when often people have asked us about, how do you handle the uncertainty of having work or getting work,
Right.
having clients. Mm-hmm. And for us, maybe we've just been lucky, but it has just worked out. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is that at any given time, you can talk to 3 or 4 different people that come to us for new business. Many of those won't work out. And in some cases, we've gotten nervous that hasn't happened.
Right.
But over time, we've realized that we know who Stitzlein Studio is and what clients are right for us to work with. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't work out with someone, it means that we weren't meant to work with them. And so that when anybody's starting a business, we have several friends in the time that we've started businesses who have also started. And that uncertainty is the most challenging thing to deal with. But if you just come back to your offering and your what your goals are, then I think it all comes together. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that we kind of always come back to is we like to work with clients that are at a pivot point, meaning mm-hmm. They're ready for a change. They're excited to propel their business. We always ask about their roadmap, and mm-hmm. So there are certain things that make us excited to work with a client, or know that maybe this is not going to work out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, maturity to know what that is. I'm sure that only comes with time, right?
Right. Yeah. I think it's about being brave enough to know what you're passionate about and pursue that. I remember when I was just about to graduate, I stole a copy of Photographer from a design agency in New York. Well, they gave me the DVD or the CD at the time, I think. So I really wanted to learn how to design type, because I was, of course, curious about it from learning at doing it by hand at UC, and I was excited about it, and I pursued that, and over time I became known for typefaces, and I think that's something we're known for today. With, like we talked about earlier, is we're really known for typeface design, brand, and now we're doing it at such large scale, and I think it's because like a boss of mine at Nike said to me when I left for Google from Nike. I said, okay, what's the one piece of advice you would give me? He said, Joe, don't be afraid to be selfish. And I think for creative, what that means is know what you're excited about and pursue it, because that is what you're going to be good at. That's what you're going to be great at, is what is you're passionate about, whether it's a form of design or a business vertical to support as a designer, or a type of team you want to be. Don't be afraid to be a little selfish and follow what you're excited about, because then you're going to be really good at that as a designer. And that's when you're going to be successful, is when you're excited about it. So it's hard to know that sometimes, because you get a lot of advice like, oh, packaging is really hot, so I got to do packaging. Well, if you don't like packaging, don't be a packaging designer. If you love packaging, be the best packaging designer. So it's important to know what you're excited about and also be brave enough to really pursue it, because that's what's going to make you successful as a designer.
I'm really thankful that I was able to go through the DAAP program. I feel like everything started there. It was that rigor of the projects, the rigor of the craft, especially the rigor of always having a reason for doing things. The fact that the UC DAAP program is located in the Midwest brings all those really hard work ethics to our background. And then, of course, the co-op program. There's nothing that could have compared to that experience of having that much work before we graduated. Really set the course for me to decide that going to San Francisco was the right move for me. And I think, I always think about why did I do that, or what did I think would happen? And the answer is I didn't know, but I knew that something exciting was going to happen. And it all started with being a student at DAAP and all of those really wonderful principles that we learned there.
Right on.
Absolutely. We're so lucky to have DAAP here in Cincinnati. I'm just a kid from Morrow, Ohio, but I got really lucky to get into that program. So I'm very thankful.
No, that's great. I mean, that's great. These are the stories we love to hear and tell and share. So thank you both for, taking the time to tell your story. Thanks for, just the insights you've given us into the lessons learned. I feel like we packed, 20 plus years of experience into maybe a 30, 40-minute conversation here that we're giving away for free. So that's generous of you. Thank you for that.
That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Joe and Leslie, please stay in touch. We will love to watch and continue to cheer for you and keep you connected in any way that we can. And we want to thank everybody who has tuned in to check us out and is continuing just to look at what this creative, innovative, distanced world looks like right now. We're figuring it out together. So we appreciate everybody who's listened and joined in. And we want to also thank Cincinnati Bell for being such a great sponsor and partner to make this possible. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and would love to have you check us out on all the different social channels and interact with us. Let us know who we should talk to next, too. So we want to hear from you. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.